everyone. So I asked on Twitter if you guys wanted me to do a review of Lovecraft Country, and you asked and you shall receive. Okay, so Lovecraft Country. So I suck at episode descriptions, so bear with me. I tried to make this one as good as possible, and just a warning, spoilers.
Get your ass up! We gotta get the fuck out of here now!
Korean War veteran Atticus Tick Freeman gets a letter from his emotionally distant and estranged father saying that he has a mysterious ancestral inheritance in Ardham, Massachusetts. So he goes on a road trip with his best friend Letitia Letty Lewis, played by Journey Smollett, Queen, love her, so glad she's getting her coin and her flowers, mwah, and his uncle, played by Courtney D. Vance, on a road trip to this place. During their trip, they deal with a lot of racism. They are attacked by a lynch mob. They are assaulted by a bunch of racist cops in a Sundown county, until finally they are almost killed. And then they're attacked by giant Lovecraft monsters, which incidentally help them escape by eating all the racists, which, you know, shout out to them. And they escape and they make it to Ardham, Massachusetts, where this mysterious, weird looking white man opens the door for them and is like, "Hello, Negroes, welcome to the party. Would you like to wash up?" In general, I gotta say, I have deeply loved how HBO has become this place where so many different kinds of Black talent have been allowed to create, between Insecure, I May Destroy You, Watchmen, and now Lovecraft Country, not to mention a Black Lady sketch show and everything else that they've developed. It just is it's a wide range of Black content, and all of it is hitting very different lenses, giving a much wider look at what Black media and what Black creators can do. So I think it's great that HBO has become a place where people have been able to make this kind of work. It's honestly hitting all the cylinders. And I'll admit, at first I was a little nervous about this coming out because the original book, written by Mark Ruff, he is a white man, and so there is always this kind of anxiety about, you know, white people telling these very intrinsically Black stories, but it has been done well. I've heard good things about the book. I chose not to read the book because I heard it was going to be made into a television show, and I just didn't want the book's imagery and the book's story to overwhelm my enjoyment of the series. Jonathan Majors, I believe is his name. He plays Tick. He was in The Five Bloods, that new Spike Lee joint, and he is excellent. He is, whoever did those t-shirts, Nobel Prize, because he looks amazing. I love his glasses. I think that they do a very good job early on getting you into his mind. That opening sequence where you see the War of the Worlds, where you see the homage to you know, John Carter and the Princess of Mars books. You get a lot of really good idea of where Tick's mind is, and through the dialogue between him and his uncle, you really feel the relationship between him and his father before we ever see them interact. And I don't know when they're going to interact because I did not get screeners, so I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. Courtney D. Vance, who is Angela Bassett's husband, shout out to them, is, you know, very good at being the wise older uncle in this series. I love how supportive he is of Tick. I like how they hint about him both being a supporting person in fueling Tick's love of pulp, of genre, but however not always being there and being a force to protect him from the abusive nature of his father and, you know, George's brother. I think it's always interesting when we talk about Black boyhood and how from father to son there was this passing of trauma, this passing of anxiety. And I think through Tick's relationship with his father, you see a father who is very dedicated and secure and strong in his Blackness, and sort of sees his son diddling in these sort of white activities, and he is like no, you're not going to perpetuate these things. You're not going to do these things. You're going to do it. You're doing it wrong. You're doing Black wrong. And I think that's a very interesting thing, because even now, when we talk about like the blurred community, there's always a group of people who are like, people picked on me because I was Black and I liked anime and because I read books and da-da-da-da. And as someone who like was a bookish Black girl, and you know, there was a little bit of a stigma to it. It really is white supremacy pressing down on you and trying to minimize your interest by weaponizing this idea that something that you like inherently can't be for you.
On the creation of niggas.
Now that's one of Lovecraft's we don't hear mentioned often.
Pops made me memorize that poem. Word for word after he caught me reading this.
I really find that fascinating, and I can't wait to see that explored more, because I just think that's a very interesting and just a very eternal struggle between Black identity and the pride that we have as Black folk in our culture, in our heritage, but also for those of us who grew up in, you know, Western imperialistic societies, how we are also inoculated to liking a lot of this white shit that could be hella problematic and sometimes actually tells us that we should not like ourselves, are written by people who did not believe in our humanity, which is kind of the crux of the whole juxtaposition between H.P. Lovecraft and telling this hella Black Jim Crow horror story. Just going into the big moments, you know, the chase scene was amazing. I think the comedy was great. The music, when that Tierra Wax song started playing, I was like, yes, they get it. They're feeling it. I just enjoyed it at the opening sequence while we're getting ready for all this tension. We do get these moments of Black joy, of, you know, George and his wife. Hippolyta is how they pronounce it in the show. I was like, it's not Hippolyta? I was shook. Them being together and, you know, making love. He was getting that wop. You know, their daughter, Diana D, who is making her own comics, the block party, them putting the water on and just dance. It felt so real and genuine. You know, their kids outside my street doing that same thing almost every weekend. So it felt very beautiful to see this Black joy at the very beginning, the sense of community, camaraderie all together as you get ready for all of the aggressions going on in the show. And I think what I find really great, even though it can be triggering at times, is how shows like this and Watchmen are allowing white audiences, the white audiences that have HBO, to see with their own two eyes the historical trail, to see the historical path between where we are today and the past. Because I think just when there's that scene where the James Baldwin speech is going off and you're seeing these fucking white nerds just making these ape noises at Atticus, and I'm like, this man could break all three of y'all in one bit, but y'all are just so leveled up, y'all so hyped up on white supremacy. You really trying to get smoked. It was really like, and I knew he wanted to punch them out, but I was like, boy, don't do it, because yes, you could kick all their asses, but they gonna get you the next day. It's not worth it. But when they leave that like pop shop, I think it's a gas station. When they leave the gas station, you see the Aunt Jemima billboard. And I think just this year, we got rid of Aunt Jemima. And it is this and this was filmed way before, but it is just this very powerful reminder that when we say these symbols are of oppression, or were made to mock us, or were intentionally created to weaponize minstrelsy against us, we're not making that shit up. That is what that shit is. And I think it's really important that audiences get to see this. And also, to be quite frank, we as Black people are kept from this information. A lot of people just found out about sundown towns through this show. And this kind of stuff is kept from us. And what I think is really interesting about the sundown towns is that a lot of people have this assumption that sundown towns were primarily in the South. While the South was very much segregated during these times, and you know, the South is actually now more integrated, better integrated than a lot of places in the North. Sundown towns primarily existed in like the East Coast, the West, and the Pacific Northwest. There's a really good book on sundown towns by the author of Lies My Teacher Told Me, and he basically breaks down that beginning in 1890 all throughout 1960 and still to some degrees perpetuated now. White Americans established thousands of towns that were white only and exclusionary. They would push Black people out of these communities, out of these towns, and keep them out through threats of violence, through harassment, to the point where even traveling on trains and buses, if you were Black, you either could not get off of the platform. You could not get past the bus stop because they would harass you. And if you did have to go through town, if you were there past night, they would absolutely harass you. That chase sequence, well acted, tension, and like just completely that may not have been based on one substantial event, but it is based on this reality of not even police officers, just regular people chasing Black, men, women, children out of towns because they could. In fact, there is a reference earlier in the episode. George mentions what would have happened if his wife had got caught in Anna instead of him.
Crazy idea to go out on the road. I can't imagine what would happen if those crackers had caught her outside of Anna instead of me.
Anna is a town in Illinois, and Anna is an acronym that stands for Ain't No Allowed. And that is the origin of that phrase for that town. It is just a reminder that it's an exclusionary environment, and that a lot of these places are still majority white, and it's not by accident. It is by sundown town machinations, and it's a part of our history. And as much as people like to rag on the South, the reality is that everywhere has exceptional, horrific stories that you can pull about the treatment of Black Americans. Nowhere is exempt. So there's no need in trying to point fingers one way or the other, because when it comes down to it, as a New Yorker, I can say this: the schools in the South, much better integrated than the schools up here. If I were to pick one thesis I kind of got from this episode, and what I kind of thought was the overarching of the episode, it would be this relationship between Black readers and minority groups and oppressive writers. There is this scene after when Tick is coming home and he's walking with this woman after the bus gives up because they can't get transportation anywhere else, where she asks what book he's reading, and he's reading The Princess of Mars, and he explains that the main character, John Carter, is a Confederate officer who, becomes a Martian war leader.
You said the hero was a Confederate officer.
Ex-Confederate.
He fought for slavery. You don't get to put an X in front of that.
Stories are like people. Love them doesn't make them perfect. You just try and cherish them. Overlook their flaws.
Yeah, but the flaws are still there.
And I think that's just kind of like the overall theme of sort of like the show, and why Lovecraft is an interesting way of dealing with this. Because Lovecraft, due to being dead for so long, a lot of his work has been reclaimed. A lot of his work has been allowed to exist beyond him because, he died poor. His work has been collaborated and built upon since then. So as much as he owns the Lovecraftian horror genre in name, he is denounced for that as well. That being said, I found out about the On the Creation of poem, which is mentioned in this episode. I never heard of it before, so I looked it up. I will link to it down below, and it really was chilling because it was a reminder that this writer inherently disagreed with the humanity of myself and the humanity of people like Tick, but yet Tick is drawn to these stories featuring heroes that were legitimately fighting against the rights of his ancestors to exist, because the wish fulfillment that they give you, because of the adventures you're allowed to go on with them. And I think it's such a powerful statement to how Black and brown people have been forced to really make space for oppressive forces to be part of their reality. I mean, I love Jane Austen. I love A Little Princess, even though there's a lot of imperialistic elements to it. We very often relate and latch on to characters that may not really be, politically woke for us, but they give us an element of escapism. And if the author is dead, then, you know, but it is difficult. It is difficult to be someone who is trying to find wish fulfillment, trying to find adventure, and only ever seeing white people, white protagonists to go in that adventure with you. So yeah, I love this episode. I'm really excited about the rest of the show. I love the cast. I think that they're all very talented. Like I said, I haven't seen Screener, so I don't know where it's gonna go. And I don't think I'm gonna do an episode for every single, I don't think I'm gonna do this for every single episode, unless there's something I really wanna say, something I think is really interesting. But I just wanted to come up and do this. Ooh, two things. So I do love Journey. I think she's amazing. But whenever I see that the primary woman, black woman in the show, is a light-skinned woman, I'm always like, okay, spotted. Where are the dark-skinned women going to be? We do see her half-sister Ruby. We do see Dee and Hippolyta. However, they are supporting characters, not main. So hopefully they will get more to do, even though they're in a different environment now. But I am hoping that we will have more different body types and shapes of women coming back into the cast, just so that Journey isn't the only black woman we're seeing being represented in the show. One of my favorite little like trivia things is when Tit goes to that bar. It's called Denmark Vesey's bar. Denmark Vesey was a former slave from St. Thomas. He got his freedom in Charleston, South Carolina, and he ended up starting the chapter of the African Methodist Church, the AME Church, in Charleston. And he allegedly, but you know, even though he was freed and he freed his family, he was responsible for organizing a slave rebellion where they were going to kill all the slave owners, free the slaves, and escape to Haiti, which was independent at this time. This is about 1822. However, people snitched. When Kendrick says that some of y'all got snitches in your DNA, these are the kind of people he's talking about. He was hanged along with eventually, I think, 50 other people, even though no white people were killed. But you know, that's slavery and racism for you. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you thought of Lovecraft Country. Were there any little things that you caught in the episode that I didn't touch on? Let me know down below. I just want to say finally thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. You guys have been an amazing, amazing presence in my life. I couldn't do anything without you, so thank you all for your support. And even those of you who like my quality but can't do Patreon right now because we are in a pandemic and it's crazy, you know, just liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing any of my video does amazing for the algorithm. And just, you know, like that button, smash that bell. Is that what it is?
This is the story of a boy and his dream. But more than that, it is the story of an American boy in a dream that is truly American.